Hey everybody, so welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. So today is the first day of spring. So spring has sprung and it's time to actually get to planting. Well, I've been talking about planting for a while now. But yeah, it's really time to seriously get serious about planting. Here recently we had a small frost here in northeast Jacksonville, north side of Jacksonville. So there are some things that had I planted out sooner might have gotten frozen, but I think it was slight enough to where it wasn't really an issue. Normally speaking, my major planting time is right around the first part of March, but the weather here has been really weird. We've had a late almost frost, or actually minor frost. My neighbor told me he had frost on his windshield. I don't get up that early, so I don't know. I assume he's correct. But at any rate, we've also had some really hot temperatures. A lot of the stuff that I planted that should have been fine in a springtime scenario actually bolted, like lettuce and tatsoi and a lot of other things. And by bolting, what I mean by that is basically it has gone to seed. When certain plants get too hot, they'll go ahead and go to seed, because they think the summertime is here. It's time to produce seeds before they die off due to the heat. So the weather has been odd. I mean, the end of February is very hot. I mean, we were in the 90s in February, which is crazy, even for around here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to plant. First thing I want to do, I want to talk to you about what to plant in the first part of spring. For that, I will go to my handy dandy notebook, and I'm going to list them off for you. So what to plant in March: bush beans, pole beans, cantaloupe, corn, cucumbers, eggplant, okra, black-eyed peas, peppers, potatoes, pumpkin, summer squash, winter squash, tomatoes, carrots, celery, collards, endive/escarole, kohlrabi, leeks, lettuce, parsley, English peas, radishes, and turnips. Alright, now on that list, some of the things I already have planted. I've already planted some cucumbers, but I'm going to plant some more today. Haven't done eggplant yet. I have my peppers planted. I planted a couple of rows of potatoes. I didn't plant a lot of potatoes this year. I normally try and do that at the end of, well, just after Valentine's Day. But like I said, the weather was so hot, I was like, man, I don't even know if I should. But it's another thing. Potatoes are so cheap that it's really hard to justify trying to grow them, depending on how much space you got. Now, if you got a ton of space, by all means, go for it. But anyway, and then the storage is another issue with potatoes. We'll talk more about that later. I did plant tomatoes. I have some celery growing. I have a few carrots growing. I got to plant some more. Collards I got. Lettuce I've got some planted. Parsley I got growing. And I got some turnips in the ground. So a lot of this stuff I already have planted in various places throughout the garden. I've got over here, I got some potatoes and peppers. I've got some cucumbers there. I have got some zucchini over there. Then I've got the turnips over here, some carrots right there, tomatoes, a few more peppers and lettuce over here, and then of course my strawberries right next to me. So those are all some of the things that I'm going to be planting today. So let's get to work. Alright, so we're going to plant some peas along this trellis right here. And I got two different packages. Now this is last year's, which is interesting because, well, they're different brands. But both of them say plant them 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep, spacing 2.5 foot. 2.5 foot to 2 inches. All right, but what they talk about is double rows. So what I'm going to do is on either side of this trellis, I'm going to do a double row, which is what they talk about on this package. Basically, they're talking about 2 inches apart, and double rows spaced 6 inches apart. So 6 inches, about the length of my hand or so. And then we want to basically get them on either side of this trellis, which should be fine. Now when it comes to peas, for whatever reason, I have a hard time getting my seeds to germinate. Not really sure what that's all about. But I'll probably try again this year and we'll see how it goes. All right, but like I said, we've got two varieties. So this is the Sugar Daddy, because I like being a sugar daddy. And we're gonna dig about a 1-inch trough. Now, again, from that first knuckle up, it's about an inch, plus or minus a few. So I'm just going to dig a trough along here, about an inch deep. And that's about an inch, and I'm going to plant them about 2 inches apart. Alright, now, you don't have to dig a trough. You can actually just stick your finger in the ground if you want to do so. And that's fine. Should not be an issue. And then you want to cover them up. And just like any other plant, you're going to make sure you water everything very well after you plant the seeds. Alright, so we're going to do that right there. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the trellis. Now, peas are a very light plant. They're not real heavy. And so even though this trellis is somewhat flimsy, which I am going to do something to reinforce it a little bit, the bottom line is it doesn't take a real heavy-duty trellis to grow up peas. Alright? As opposed to something like if you're trying to grow squash or watermelon or something heavy up a trellis, which is doable. Peas, you don't have to have as heavy-duty of a trellis. Another good example is we grew loofah gourds, and the plants got so huge, and the fruit is pretty big too, that it basically collapsed my little weakling trellises down. All right, so I'm going to plant them here, and then over here I've got another spot that gets shade because of an overhanging tree, and I'll probably plant them there too, because one of the problems with peas is that once it gets hot, they die out. So I'm thinking if I can get them in a spot where they got somewhat shade, at least for part of the day, hopefully they'll continue to grow a little bit later on. So we're going to give that a shot and see how that works. Alright, let's move on to something else. Alright, so along this trellis here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plant cucumbers. Now cucumbers, let's see, what do I got? Muncher cucumbers? Yeah, Muncher cucumbers here. So what we're going to do is plant them here. This is a little stronger trellis, so it should be fine. But you don't have to trellis your cucumbers. You can grow cucumbers and just let them grow along the ground fine. The only thing is it takes up more space that way. It's not to say that that's not something you should do, but that, it's just what I've chosen to do. Which way works best? I mean, I don't really know. I'll be honest with you. I have had some years where the ones in the ground didn't do well, or on the ground, and I've had some years where the ones trellis didn't do well. I think it has more to do with the particular growing conditions of that year and, the area and how fertile the soil is. Now, you want to plant them about a ½ inch deep. So I'm just going to dig me a little trough here. And then just like everything else, even though it says, how far does it say? Plant them apart. Plant spacing 18 to 36 inches. But I'm going to do them pretty close together. And then I'll thin them down to about a foot apart. But one of the things I want to address is fertilizer and such. All right, first off, seeds do not need fertilizer to grow. All right? And what do I mean by that? So, basically, you don't need to fertilize immediately to get your plants started. But now, once they get to growing up a while, they get to where they're 6-8 inches tall, or maybe a little less, you might want to throw some fertilizer at it. Now, of course, I don't use fertilizer. What I use for fertilizer is compost. So what I'll do is once the plants have gotten started up pretty good and they're starting to grow, I'll pack this area with a whole bunch of compost, and then basically as the water passes through the compost, it'll do two things. It'll insulate the soil from drying out as quickly, and it'll provide nutrients as that rots down, and as the rain and whatever other water I give it flows through that compost. It'll help to keep that all fertilized. And I do that with a lot of different plants. All right, but that's how you got to, how to go about it. You can start with the compost in the soil if you're so desiring. And don't get me wrong, having fertilizer in the soil ahead of time isn't going to hurt the plants as they first start off. But everything a new plant needs to grow to a few inches is in the seed. All right, so just planting the seed will get it started, and then once you get it in the ground and it starts to grow up, that's when you need to provide the nutrients. All right, moving on. Okay, so here I want to plant some carrots. Over here I've got some peas growing. That's my shady spot where I'm hoping that they'll continue to grow maybe a little bit longer. Got my peas over here. This is a nice short section to grow carrots in. Now you don't need a short section to grow carrots, but the idea is what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a row right along here. So about here, and you notice I'm just barely scratching the surface. With carrots, you don't want a lot of dirt over the top of the seeds. All right, the seedlings themselves are pretty weak. Once the carrots get up and grow, they get started, they're a pretty sturdy plant, but until that point they're very weak. So you don't want a lot of soil on top of your carrots. All right, so just barely, less than half a finger, a quarter of a fingernail deep. All right, I just want maybe 1/8 of an inch over the top of them. A lot of people have issues starting carrots. I have just not had that issue. I will tell you that I've often recommended to people that you should grow carrots for your kids because one, it's one of the easiest things in the world to grow, in my experience. And two, kids just love, especially little kids, love grabbing a hold of something green and pulling out this surprise up underneath the ground. It's just the coolest thing. And most kids like carrots. So, I'm going to plant them here. I'm going to plant them fairly shallow, and I think that's one of the other issues is people don't plant shallow enough. I think they plant too deep, and so they have problems with the weak, really weak seedlings being able to actually get through the soil above them. And then the second thing is, you want your carrots spaced probably 3-4 inches apart, but you really got to plant close. Well, you don't have to. I plant very closely so that I get a lot of seeds in the ground that can sprout. And then the idea is that once they start sprouting, I will go through and I will thin them once I can tell what's a sturdy plant and what's not. And then the last thing about carrots is they have to stay moist. The seeds, in my experience, have to stay moist. So how do you do that? Well, it's hard when you have sandy soil like I do. All right, if you got clay soil, you might be able to keep them moist longer. But with this really sandy soil I have, you really got to keep the water on them. All right, so and you can't really mulch them because they're very weak plants and they have a hard time breaking through the soil as is. So really the secret, in my opinion, to growing carrots is water them daily. If you got seedlings, until you get up to about at least 2 inches tall, you really want to water them every day. All right, now as far as the short rows, and why am I talking about short rows? Well, what happens with carrots is they all come basically at the same time. So I'm not going to have some carrots like on a tomato. You get some tomatoes that start off and they grow faster and they get to producing sooner, and then you got plants at the bottom of the plant maybe, or the top of the plant, that are ripening first, and then you get that continuous production. Carrots aren't that way. They're all going to grow about the same time, and they're all going to be very close or very similar in size. So what we do is we'll do basically another row here in a couple of weeks. And then a couple weeks after that, I'll do another row here. And then a couple weeks after that, and so on. It's called succession planting. So I'll keep making more rows as the spring goes on, and you know, probably up until around June or so, once it gets really hot. But it's been my experience that a lot of carrots will survive even in the heat. Now my favorite for growing here in the Jacksonville area is this Danvers 126, or Danvers anyway. I don't really care the number or you know who makes it, what the brand name is. But the Danvers so far has produced way better than any other carrot. They're sweeter, they're better. I really like the Danvers carrot. And I have not successfully been able to get seed yet. I'm still working on that. I'm not sure why. We're going to get into that probably later on. But I think one of the things, carrots from my reading and what I understand, will produce off of last year's carrots. So you want to leave some of the ground. But the heat usually gets to them and kills them off before I can get that done. Or the humidity rots the seeds. I have yet to have any viable seeds come out of any of my carrot plants. Alright, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do sunflower seeds. Now I've got a sunflower head here that we saved just for this purpose. It was a good sized head. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take from this head a bunch of the sunflower seeds themselves, and we're going to use those to do our planting. Now, as far as selecting which sunflower seeds to plant, sometimes you'll get the flat ones, and then sometimes you'll get the thicker, heavier duty ones. Alright, obviously what you want to do is you want to plant the heavier duty, thicker ones. Alright, now they want to go about an inch deep or so. So I'm going to go ahead and plant them maybe an inch and a half. Stick a couple seeds in each hole. And I'm going to space them about 6 inches apart. Like so. Now sunflowers are a good strong plant, but I have heard, and I can't confirm this, that they're called, or they are allelopathic, I think is the word. And what does that mean? That means that they can help, or they can prevent, not help I guess, but they can actually prevent other plants from growing in the area. So, is that true or not? I don't know. I've heard other people talk about planting sunflowers and then running their beans up the sunflowers. I mean, I don't know. I've never really noticed it myself, but the idea is that you may not want to plant them right next to something else that you have growing, because if that is true, it might prevent those plants from growing. Now, so they get really tall, but they don't get very bushy. So like, I got my tomatoes here, and obviously I want my tomatoes to get a lot of sun, but I don't think that that's really going to be an issue, because like I said, the sunflowers themselves don't put out that many leaves, so there's plenty of sunlight able to get past and to shine on your other plants. Alright, so I don't worry about it, to be honest with you. I just plant them where I think it would be good for them to grow. And here it's kind of a cool spot because, as you can probably see behind me, there is a whole bunch of other houses. And so it's kind of a cool thing for other people to see, is sunflower plants growing up. And you can see them from a pretty good distance because they make a nice big head. So I'll go ahead and plant these along here. Now I don't know what the preferred time is for sunflowers, but it seems like I planted them in the spring pretty often and they've done pretty well. It does take a while, because it's a really large plant, to get them grown up to full size. So that's what I'm going to plant for today. We'll get that going on. I'm going to plant a few other things, but I don't want to make this video go too long. But this is a great time to get to planting. With that being said, let me go back over the list. Alright, so that's what we got planted so far. what did I plant? Cucumbers, I planted carrots, sunflower seeds, and peas. Got a bunch more things I'm going to plant today. As you can see, I got my whole list out here of different things that I'm going to plant on my different seed packages that I'm going to get stuck in the ground today or tomorrow. Got a lot of things already started in trays and stuff and pots, which I've put most of them out. I will be putting some more tomatoes and some other things out here over the next few days. But this is the list of what you can plant in March. Bush beans, pole beans, cantaloupes, corn, cucumbers, eggplant, okra, black-eyed peas, peppers, potatoes, pumpkin, summer squash, winter squash, tomatoes, carrots, celery, collards, endive, escarole, kohlrabi, leeks, lettuce, parsley, English peas, radish, and turnips. All of these are the things that you can, well, here in the Northeast Florida area, that you can plant in March. Now, a lot of these same things are on there for April, but some things aren't, like lettuce. Pretty much this is the last month that you can get lettuce in the ground and hopefully be successful. You know, a lot of different things are radishes. You know, once it starts to get hot and really warms up in April, May, June, and July, there's just not a lot that you can plant, because some of these things take a while to mature, and once the heat hits, they'll either bolt out and not produce, or they just will die off completely. So that's something to think about. We are running a little bit late this year. Some of it was just other concerns, and you know, family life, yada yada, so on and so forth. But a lot of it was just unsurety with the weather. You know, the things I thought I could plant in February, I couldn't plant because the weather got so hot and everything bolted out. Didn't want to grow well. Another guide that you can go by, all right, and I highly recommend this, if you have plants that have gone to seed and you've allowed the seeds to fall, if you can identify the seedlings and see what's sprouting in the just the natural course of things, right? Because like lettuce, for example, I've let my lettuce go to seed several times, and I've gotten several lettuce plants that have come up on their own. And if you can identify what they are, like I can, you know, which you can usually tell on lettuce because it has a very, very light colored leaf, at least for the black seeded Simpson. So I can tell when I've actually got when I've actually got lettuce growing up. So that's a good indicator that it's time to start planting your lettuce, for example. Same thing with like basil. I have basil that goes to seed. I let it go to seed. It starts to sprout. It's time to start planting basil. So that's a great way of telling what to plant when, if you don't really have a good guide. Or like on my list, there's several things like cilantro's not on there. What else? Parsley. Is parsley on there? I don't think parsley. I'm sorry. Basil is not on there. We like to grow a lot of basil. A lot of different things like that. Now, this is the time to plant the seeds. If you're looking for when to plant your potted plants, that's a whole nother issue. Okay, so basically anything that's potted, typically once you've reached the end of your last expected frost, or once you got a really good idea that it's not going to do another frost, which for me is usually around the 1st of March, that's when I will start putting out my potted plants. And by that I mean, you know, stuff you started in the trays, or stuff that you go to any one of the stores and buy that's already in a small pot. You can start putting those out right now if you haven't already. Okay, so I mean, and it's a great time. Now's when all of the stores have got a lot of different vegetables that you can put out that are already in pots and already grown up. And you can actually get a head start. I mean, you can get some of them plants, you know, are pretty good sized, and that will give you that head start to where you'll be planting a large plant instead of planting a seed and waiting for it to grow, you know, that extra foot or so, or 2 feet that it's already grown. So that's something to think about. The only thing I would caution you on is if you're trying to do this on a budget, a potted plant costs a whole lot more than seeds. For example, these Sugar Daddy peas are $1.96 for a package of, I don't even know, man. There's a whole bunch. Basically all the peas you'll need for the season. And individual pea plants can cost anywhere from $5 for a pack of 6 or $6 for a pack of 6 for a buck a piece. Or if you buy the individual pots, I noticed they were almost $6 for individual plants in a singular pot. Those tend to be a little bit larger, but you know, I mean, $6. You know, I mean, what's a can of peas going for? 50 cents? That's 12 cans of peas, man. You gotta grow a lot of peas to get 12 cans of peas. But now you'll be getting them out of your garden. They'll be organic, or you know, if you're growing organically. So there is advantages to growing your own stuff. But if you're trying to do this on a budget, by far and large, the best way to go is buying seed or saving seed, which is completely free, which I highly recommend. Like you'll see, I'm fixing to scatter some cilantro seed, and I have a ton of cilantro seed. So it's a lot of that's going to go out today. I get a lot of stuff that just I've allowed to go to seed and will sprout up just voluntarily. And I'll either let it grow where it is, or I'll go ahead and move it, transplant it somewhere else. Well, anyway, I don't want to make this go too long. That's why I'm not showing you all of the different things I'm going to plant. But now's a great time to get to planting. If you haven't already, highly recommend it. I highly recommend you growing a garden. If you've got a spot where you can actually grow it, you can grow it. All of the things I planted today can be grown in containers of some sort. Larger plants like sunflowers will take a larger container. Carrots will need a deeper container, I mean, because carrots can grow, you know, a foot and a half long. I mean, I've had them this long. So you want at least a foot of depth for carrots. But a lot of other things you can grow in all kind of different containers. They may not grow as large, they may not produce as much, but they will still grow and they will still produce. Even if you don't have an area, you know, get you some buckets, get you some, you know, any used container you've got that will allow drainage. And by that you can drill holes in the bottom of coffee cans. You can drill holes in the bottom of buckets. You can drill holes in the bottom of pretty much any container you might buy things in. Like we have a pool, and this year I'm going to convert some of my my pool chlorine containers, because they're nice buckets and they're kind of square. So I'm going to convert some of those into pots and see how it goes growing in that. The only thing I would caution you is if it has chemicals in it, you need to make sure that those chemicals are removed as much as possible. Like the chlorine, for example. I've got a couple of them that I've allowed to sit for a couple of years, or like last year's, but I've allowed to sit with water in it to help make sure that all of that gets leached out of that plastic, so that you don't have chemicals getting into your food as you go along and eat it. By far and large, the best thing is either a new container or something that had food or drink in it, because you know that plastic is going to be a lot safer. We've actually grown in juice containers, like juice bottles. We've grown in soda bottles. We've grown in all kinds of different things. So there's a lot of different availability there for ways to grow if you don't have a garden of your own. All right, with that being said, I appreciate y'all stopping by. Do me a favor, give me a like and a subscribe, and let me know what you think. I do like the comments, and I'm going to get better. You know, this last few months has been kind of weird. I'm going to get better at answering the comments a little quicker. But like I said, do me a favor, give me a like and a subscribe if you like the content. But most importantly, get something growing. You know, grow something in your yard. It's a wonderful thing to be able to go out in your backyard, grab a salad, grab some things to eat. We just now finished up the last of our onions from last year, and I've already got onions growing so that I can use some of the spring onions for eating purposes, for food, for cooking purposes. It's a really wonderful thing to be able to go out and get food in your own backyard. All right, thanks for stopping by. Like I said, give me that like and subscribe, and most importantly, grow something. Come back and see me.